Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Raid Shadow Legends. Today we're going to talk about 10 epic champions, my top 10 epic champions that I'd recommend you guys build and not put books into. These champions are very good even without putting your epic books in them. Now I'll probably come out with another video for legendary champions and maybe even for a top 10, top 15 list of champions that need books in order to have the true value out of these champions, or I should say especially need books, because let's face it, books, no matter what champion you're talking about, 90% of the time, 95% of the time are going to improve your champion, even if it's just a little bit. There are some exceptions to the rule though, so again, let me know if you find those video ideas interesting. If so, I will bring them to you in the next week or two here on the channel. So again, we're talking about epic champions that do not need to be booked in today's video. Let's start out with one of my absolute favorites. You guys know this, I've done 2 video guides on Vrask. Vrask is one of those champions that arguably is better without books. I mean, I'm not gonna split hairs here. He's really good no matter what, and you can book him, sure. But really, it's all about his passive, right? Heals all allies by 10% of his max HP when he inflicts a critical hit. Every time he inflicts a critical hit, he's gonna be healing by 10% of his max HP. So you build him out with a high crit rate, you build him out with a lot of HP, and he is an S tier healer inside this game. Now his A1, it's just damage that you're putting books into. Who really cares, right? He's not your damage dealer, although he can put out a decent amount of damage, I guess, but you don't need to pour 4 books into him to get an extra 20% damage on his A1 at that. Now, it fills his turn meter by 20% if the attack is critical, which it always will be if you're building him out correctly. So the idea here is that the turn meter is actually more valuable, in my opinion, than the damage on the A2. I would rather him going more often. Put him in Relentless gear. Give him that, extra 20% turn meter boost every time he lands his A1. His Lightning Strike does hit pretty hard for a support champion, but I don't really care about putting 4 more books into him to reduce the cooldown to 3 turns. I'd rather have him getting the turn meter anyway, doing more heals. So Vrask is definitely a champion that you do not need to put your epic books into in order to capture pretty much their full value. So next up is Allure, a Demon Spawn champion, Magic Affinity. If you're familiar here with the channel, you know I love Allure. She is a turn meter specialist. Now you might be looking at her base attack, 1575, and saying, dude, Ash, are you crazy? Turn meter specialist, look at her base attack, but her abilities actually don't have great multipliers on them. She can put out a respectable amount of damage, but really is far from a nuker. She is turn meter, and her turn meter comes, what makes Allure so great is her turn meter comes on the A1. 3 times, decreases target turn meter by 25% on each hit. So, hey, some OP S tier math skills here. That's 75% turn meter reduction every time she's landing her A1. Her other skills, they're kind of cool. Decreased defense and sleep on her A2. Can get the cooldown down to a 3 turn. Hellish Blaze, same thing. It's always going to be a 6 turn. Doesn't put out as much damage despite the ignoring defense as you might think. And at the end of the day, it's still a 6 turn cooldown. Even if you put books into it, you're getting 10% more damage. But really, again, Allure, you just really care about her A1, and you really want her to be doing that as much as possible. So even unbooking Temptation, not bringing it down to 3 turn, it's going to hurt you a little bit against the waves, but I would argue that 3 times that random with a turn meter is actually it's actually better than her A2. Just my opinion, but either way you look at it, Allure is definitely a champion. Don't put all these books into her unless you're just a whale and you don't care, but she's perfectly serviceable, perfectly fine with no epic books at all into her. Next up is Occult Brawler. Occult Brawler, one of those champions who a lot of people who play this game think is better without books. I'm not going to get into that debate. There's a fierce debate on Clan Boss, because that's really all he's used in Clan Boss, right? Over whether he's better with books or without books. It does depend on the affinity of the Clan Boss as well. But either way, I would err on the side of just not booking Occult Brawler. There's one thing for sure, right? There's plenty of other epic champions, pretty much every single one in the game that is a decent champion that is better served to put your books into than Occult Brawler. Basically, his A1 is his passive, and his A1 is where he's doing most of his damage, right? Has a 50% chance of getting a poison debuff for 2 turns. On his passive, doesn't need books at all. 70% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff on a random enemy for 4 turns at the start of every turn. Now his A2 here, you can see it's a long ability. I'm not going to get into it. I have a guide on Occult Brawler, guys, that I stand by the information I put there, and I recommended you not book him, right? Because you can get the cooldown down to 3 turns, but the thing is, when this is a 3-turn cooldown, you're going to get less of a benefit from all of these factors here mentioned in the skill, right? So you're going to have a higher likelihood of him placing more poisons on himself, you know, thereby potentially getting an extra turn if you can get 5 more if you can get 5 poisons on him. So having this on a 4-turn actually helps you in that regard. And then of course Clan Boss, again, depending on affinity, depending on everything else, a lot of factors here, will place poisons too during the last half of the battle. So there's a lot to consider, but at the end of the day, my opinion and my recommendation to you guys would be, dude, don't even book your Occult Brawler. I think he's better without books, generally speaking, but again, that is a debate to be had on another day. Either way, don't book him. He's going to be great either way on Clan Boss. Now, I want to cover 2 arena specialists back-to-back here in Seeker and Gorgorab. So Seeker and Gorgorab are interesting champions. Now, if you're using them for the arena, where most people do, but these champions can be serviceable in a variety of other dungeons as well. But arenas especially, the thing about these champions is they're turn meter boosters, right? So you're probably only using their skills 1 or 2 times throughout the duration of the battle. That is key here when we talk about them being viable unbooked, because if you look at Seeker, on his passive is having a heal. There's no books that need to go into that, in a 60% increased defense on all allies for 2 turns when hit with a critical hit. But really, on his A2, the Tailwind is his big kind of arena ability, right? Fills the turn meter of all allies by 30% and then grants an extra turn, thereby again reducing the cooldown of this skill automatically by granting you an extra turn. And then you can go into his A1, have a chance at landing that provoke. Now the provoke chance does get better. He is one of those champions that definitely is better with epic books in him, unlike some of the ones that we've already talked about. Like, you can just leave books off of them. It's not making them that much better. Seeker and Gorgorab will be better with books, but it's just not mandatory, because with Seeker in the arena, you're using him oftentimes with a nuke team. So it's kind of like turn meter boost on his A2, right? Then he goes into his provoke on his A1, and then your debuffer goes and your nukers go. There's usually not the opportunity to be using him, you know, going back to this. If you're going back into like 5 Tailwind abilities in 1 arena battle, you're probably either losing or it's just a very, very obscure match, right? Most of the time, Seeker teams are all about speed, and you're getting those attacks down really, really quickly with that speed turn meter boost of Seeker. Same thing with Gorgorab. So Gorgorab has an animate, revives all dead allies, 25% HP, then heals them by 25%. This is already on a 6-turn cooldown, right? You can book it to 5 turns if you want to, help out a little bit with the heal. It's not going to hurt you, but if you're reviving all your allies 2 times with Gorgorab, something's probably bad, really gone astray, right, in the attack. And again, on his A2, fills the turn meter by 15%, has the increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. Again, it can be better on 3-turn cooldown. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys. At the same time, you're usually only using this ability once, and then that's it. You know, hopefully the team does its job, attacks 1 enemy, 50% chance of removing 1 buff. And again, it's all about, for Gorgorab and for Seeker, if you're using them for the arena, they can definitely be serviceable when not booked. And of course, Gorgorab has the speed aura in the arena by 23%, especially, you know, in gold 1 through 3, even a little bit in 4. People rely on Gorgorab as their speed lead and rely on Seeker as their turn meter booster. And a lot of people use these champions just without books in them. Next up is Royal Guard. So Royal Guard is just one of my favorite epic champions in the game. I think he's one of the better champions overall in the game. I use him in the end game on several of my level 20 dungeons. And I think that, you know, a lot of people listening to this probably do the same, no matter where you are. If you own Royal Guard and you're not using him, I don't know what champions you have in his place, but maybe you have a bunch of Septimuses or something. But either way, Royal Guard is really, really good, and his big money ability is Takedown. And all it does, all books do, excuse me, on this is add 20% damage. Now, I don't want to just kind of say 20% damage, who cares? Because it actually does make a big difference. If you're hitting for 1,000,000 damage, I mean, that's 200,000 extra damage that you're getting there. So it's not nothing, forgive the double negative, but at the same time, you can get tons of value. If you're hitting for 1,000,000, you can't cry about missing 200,000, right? You can get a lot of value out of Royal Guard. I would book him eventually, but I would not prioritize booking my Royal Guard. Now, his other abilities do require books as well. You can add the buff, or excuse me, the debuff chance on the decreased defense on his A1. You can get that up to 75%. Excuse me, 65%. So again, that's not bad on the decreased defense on the A1, but it's already 50%. You know, are you going to invest a bunch of books to get to 65? Sure, when you have books to burn, why not? You can also reduce the cooldown of hamstring. But again, I mean, you just got to be careful when putting books into hamstring. You just want him to be using takedown as much as humanly possible, and you don't want to be really him. You don't want to have your Royal Guard, honestly, using his other skills that often, because takedown is that good. So I think that Royal Guard is definitely a champion who deserves a nod and a mention and a place on this list in terms of a champion you can have tremendous success with if you're not putting books into him. So next up is Umbral Enchantress, guys. You guys know how I feel about this champion. I love this champion. I think she's great. And really her big abilities, her A2 and her A3, you don't really need books, right? It's already on a 3-turn cooldown here. It's already at 80% chance. You can get this to 100% chance. I'm not gonna lie, 100% is better than 80%, especially if you're talking about dungeons. You need that consistency that will kind of snowball and add up over time. But if you miss one block buffs on one enemy mob, usually, hopefully, it's not the end of the world. It's not gonna ruin your entire run. Same thing with Undying Evil, her big money ability here. It's on a 5-turn cooldown no matter what. All you're booking it for is to get that provoke up to 100% from 80%. And again here, just like we talked about on the A2, it's you know, 80% ain't too bad, right? So run with the 80%, and again, kind of like we talked about with Royal Guard, maybe save her to last in terms of if you're running a comp that you use Umbral on, or if you're in the arena and you're using Umbral on your team, maybe focus on the other champions first in terms of investing your hard to come by and hard-earned books into, and then wait for Umbral at the end, because really talking about this 10%, 10%, 10%, 10% on each of these abilities respectively, it's really just not going to be a complete game changer. She's going to be very effective even without those books on her. Next up is Doom Priest, guys. Doom Priest is a champion that I think might be my next max champion full guide on, because I don't know, it's hard to say she's underrated because people love Doom Priest. I mean, look at, even, again, we don't read a lot into these reviews here, but man, 4.9s and 5s across the board here in terms of Doom Priest, and rightfully so. It's all about her passive that doesn't require any books at all to make viable. It works no matter what, as you can see. Heals all allies by 7.5% of their HP, and removes one random debuff from them at the start of this champion's turn. You build her out with a lot of speed, and she's going to be constantly cleansing your entire team, not to mention healing them up as well. She has a force ally speed in all battles, really nothing relevant there. She has an increased attack buff on all allies for 2 turns. On a 4-turn cooldown, kind of a whatever, right? I mean, increased attack is not awful, but that's all it's doing. It's not giving them another buff. It's not, you know, doing damage to the enemies. So having this on a 3-turn cooldown, in my opinion, is not a must. And then again, on her A1, it's just damage, and she's not, you know, she's not a huge damage dealer. It's based on attack. She doesn't have amazing multipliers. You can get by with Doom Priest just relying on her cleanse and her heal, which people often overlook. 7.5% of the heal, and removing 1 debuff, that's all she's got. That's not all she's got. She's a tremendous... People, if you guys have Doom Priest, let me know, because I'm sure everybody I talk to as Doom Priest is like, yeah, she's a lifesaver and she's tremendous, and I rely on her heavily. So you can do so without putting books into her. Sticking with Knight Revenant, we're going to talk about Skull Crown. So Skull Crown is one of the best AoE nukers in the game. She only has 2 active abilities, right? She has 2 AoE attacks. Wave of Souls, you're putting books for more damage. Her A2 is Corrupting Touch, and you can put books in there for extra damage, have a better chance of placing the weaken, and get that cooldown to 3 turns. Now, even if you don't put the books into the A2, you're still going to be having an AoE at least on her other skill. She only has, again, 2 active abilities. They're both doing AoE. They're both doing a pretty decent amount of damage. Again, like we talked about with some of the champions on this list, she's better with books. Not going to sit here and lie to you guys. At the same time, she can be incredibly effective without books. Now, what about Resilient? What about her passive here? Well, she's only really, I mean, if she's dropping below 20% 2 times in a 6-turn period, you probably have bigger problems, and she's probably going to die anyway. Really, this Resilient in the arena, where she's mainly used because of her speed aura, is only going to trigger once per match. I mean, very, very rarely is she going to be triggering this throughout like 8+ rounds in the arena. And then in dungeons, if you're using her, most of the time you can get the job done with Skull Crown. If you have Skull Crown, you know this. Most of the time you can get the job done with only one of these triggering, or, you know, worst case scenario, or best case scenario, none of these triggering at all, right? So Resilient is not an ability, even though the cooldowns do look very interesting. Whenever I see a reduced cooldown on any skills, I'm like, I need a book for that, I need to book it. But with this one, it's just not the case. And then on her other passive, you're essentially wasting 2 books, right? Because most people are not pairing Skull Crown with Senesha every time. So, but books still go into this ability, so it's RNG based, and it's just like, ah man, I'd rather not put books into that one as well. And then again, the speed aura helping you out in the arena, that is Skull Crown. And last but not least, it's Zealot, one of the second best shield epic champion in the game behind Miscreated Monster. Didn't include champions like Miscreated Monster because, yes, everybody knows he's S tier with or without books, but at the same time, putting books into him does make a very big difference in terms of getting those cooldowns down to 3 and I believe 4 turns on his A2 and his A3. But Zealot, however, does not have any reduced cooldowns on his shield ability, which is really what he's known for. Plays a shield buff on all allies equal to 20% of this champion's max HP for 3 turns. That is a beast mode shield, and then has the continuous heal for 2 turns on all allies. He is just a god level support champion in the epic category. Again, with all due respect to Miscreated Monster, I think that Zealot is often overlooked in the shadow of Miscreated Monster, but he has just an amazing shield ability here. And again, you can get a little bit extra value with the shield, so books are not going to hurt him certainly, but really it's all about this shield, and you can use it just as effectively minus 20% shield when you don't put books into it. So guys, that is my rundown here of 10 epic champions that do not require books to get a ton of value from them. Let me know if I left any champions off the list. What champions do you use that you're having tremendous success with and you have no books or limited books in them as well? Would love to hear from you guys in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.